Hey guys, in this video we are checking out the Rokinon 10mm f2.8. This is a special quarantine edition of Arthur R. the show. So this lens, the reason I'm reviewing it is because there's not a whole lot of reviews on YouTube of this lens, and there are also not very many ultra-wide angle lenses for the Sony E-mount. I think that is a weak point right now in the APS-C lineup of lenses. Because for ultrawides you have the Sony 10-18, which if you've watched my videos for any length of time, you know that it struggles. Lucas, you can go play. It struggles with issues, quality control issues primarily. My current favorite ultra-wide angle lens is this right here, which is the Laowa 9mm f2.8. It is a very nice lens. It's also pretty pricey for a manual focus lens. So I thought, hey, Rokinon 10mm looks like a budget option that's going to get you close to the Laowa for $300. And here is the lens. Here is what it looks like. So very similar to other Rokinon lenses that I have looked at. The only difference here is the rose-petaled lens hood is attached permanently and it is not detachable. Therefore, you cannot use any sort of ND filters on this lens. Now, on the contrary, with the Laowa, you can see that you can remove the lens hood and you can still use ND filters with adapters because there are threads on the inside of this. So if you are one of the types of people that uses ND filters, this is the better bet. So back to the lens itself. You have aperture control with distinct clicks, which is nice because I seem to be reviewing a lot of declicked aperture lenses. The focus ring is nice and smooth. It's not too stiff, not too light, and there's a fair amount of range, but it's important to note, as there are markings here, you're focusing basically from 1 meter in front of you to infinity in about 1 centimeter of rotation. So all of this is kind of up close, and from 1 meter to infinity, that's all you have to focus. So similar to the Laowa in that regard, not great. Around the back, this is a manual focus lens, so there are no electronic connections. However, nice metal mount, and the whole lens is constructed out of, I think this is metal or some sort of aluminum, some plastic bits, but it feels like it's fairly well built, made in Korea. This lens hood is plastic. And look at the front lens element. It is huge on this thing. Now for comparison, look at how small the front lens element is on the Laowa 9mm. Quite a difference. And this Rokinon lens is an APS-C mount lens. You can't stick this on a full frame Sony and expect to get a full shot. You're gonna get something that looks like this with a ton of vignetting. So that is the lens, and it is pretty hefty, pretty heavy feeling, feels pretty sturdy. And so it should be a good lens. Now, there is another ultra wide angle Rokinon lens that you could say is ultra wide angle, and that is the Rokinon 12mm. Now that is an excellent lens. I've tested it. I've compared it to the Sigma 16 that we're using to record this video. I've compared it to the Laowa, I believe, and it is very sharp, very good lens. So I'm expecting more of the same from the 10mm. Now, this is an older lens, and you can tell it's not really designed for Sony E-mount because the lens itself is kind of this middle section here. This extension towards the back is kind of like a built-in adapter, but it's not detachable. So this was originally designed for other mounts, and they just adapted it by extending the barrel essentially and putting the mechanism to attach to a Sony E-mount on the end of it. So let's take a look at some sample photos and videos. All of these are done on my Sony a6100 with this lens, so let's take a look. So that is it for the sample photos and videos, and you know, they look pretty decent, at least from a distance. Once you start looking at the actual close-ups of the files, you start to see that this lens seems to struggle in some areas, and there are a couple of things that I noticed that I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of. So I'm gonna address those issues here. Number one is the focus. Now, the focus ring itself is fine. It's easy to use. There's plenty of rotation if you're trying to focus on stuff that's really close. Like if I was trying to take a picture of this box up close, it works fine. But like I showed you earlier, the actual range from focusing from, you know, a meter away from you to infinity is only about 1 centimeter. And the Laowa 9mm, which is a lens that I like quite a bit, suffers from the same exact issue. I mean, if you look at the focus ring here, there are some clear markings, and from about 0.5 of a meter to infinity, I mean, it's also about 1 centimeter. The difference is this lens is so much easier to focus for some reason. It's so much easier to nail focus on the Laowa, and I don't really know quite why that is, because most Rokinon lenses that I've tested are really good in the area of manual focus. And so the Rokinon 12mm, for example, is an excellent, easy lens to focus. This is not. Build quality is great, usability is great, but the focus, the manual focus on this leaves something to be desired. Now, you don't necessarily need to have excellent focus or manual focus skills with an ultra wide angle lens such as this one, because you saw that I was showing you some shots on a gimbal. For those shots, I set this camera up, turned it to infinity on the focus, and that's all I did. So once the subject comes close to the lens, you'll see that, hey, you know, it's not really in focus, but for most everything else, it's perfectly fine. What's happening in here?
Oh, you know.
Just some normal stuff.
This is what happens when you're quarantined. Your wife and baby and friends and family just kind of take over your areas. Why are you swimming on the ground?
Workout videos.
Yeah, if you guys want to work out during the quarantine, follow Janessa's channel, Fitnessa. Get it?
Fitness with Janessa.
All right, we'll go back. The second issue with this lens is the actual sharpness of the images. Now, I was expecting it to perform just like the Rokinon 12mm again, but I was disappointed. In fact, here are some side-by-side photos of my living room with the Laowa 9mm and with this Rokinon 10mm. Now, you'll notice a couple of things. Number one is the Laowa is much wider. So if you're looking for a real estate photography lens, the Laowa 9mm, even though it's a 1mm difference, it's a huge difference if you're trying to make your room look bigger. Number two, there is a very noticeable fisheye effect with the Rokinon lens. The Laowa remains less distorted. Number three, the Rokinon has a clear advantage when it comes to vignetting, as with the Laowa, you get a lot of it. Obviously, these are all things that you can correct in an editing program, but if you don't want to make any edits straight out of the camera, the shot from the Rokinon doesn't look that bad. Now, as we punch in, you'll see that there is a clear advantage to using the Laowa. Not only was it so much easier for me to focus, the image overall is sharper. I'm focusing on the focus sign here, and you can see just how much sharper the Laowa lens is. This Rokinon, unfortunately, is not very sharp at f2.8. Even in the center, it struggles quite a bit. In the corners, it's a tragedy, if I had to use a word to describe it. Once you stop it down quite a bit, and by quite a bit I mean f8, the image gets usable and it gets decently sharp for landscapes. But it is disappointing that this Rokinon is not anywhere near the sharpness of the 12mm variant that is available for Sony E-mount, and it's also a lot cheaper. So let's talk about value. The Rokinon 10mm here is $300 US. The Laowa 9mm on the other hand is $500, maybe $450 if you find it on sale. If I had to choose between the two lenses, there's absolutely no doubt that I would go with the Laowa 9mm. This is a bit of a disappointment from Rokinon, which up until this point, every other Rokinon lens that I've tested for Sony E-mount has been excellent. It's been amazing. So this is an older lens. I don't know what happened, but they seem to kind of drop the ball in terms of optical quality, I think, in this lens. And so not one that I would recommend, unfortunately. You're way better off either going with the Laowa 9mm, or if you are okay with a slightly less wider field of view, the Rokinon 12mm, highly recommended. And it's also, again, cheaper than this one. So let me know down in the comments what you guys think of this comparison. Let me know if you think the performance of this is good or bad or not that great. Also, if you have one of these lenses, what has your experience been? Hope you guys are staying safe out there. Have a great rest of your day. Stay tuned for more. Bye-bye.